Welcome to this wonderful evening session of Banking Frontiers. The topic today is architecting the secure digital landscape next. So, with me, we have two very interesting personalities here. Let me introduce you to Sanjay Kumar Tiwari, who is from India Infoline. Sanjay is an information security architect and he handles a lot of interesting technologies in and out in the area of digital transformation and digital security. And our security expert today is basically going to be Mr. Rishikesh Kamath. Rishikesh is from NTT. They have been doing a lot of very interesting work in the area of managed services, and he is going to speak to us about a very, very insightful report. So let us start first with a short session by Sanjay. Sanjay, we would love to hear from you your insights on architecting the secure digital landscape next. Welcome,
Thank
Sanjay.
you. Thank you, Babu, for that excellent introduction. Uh, Welcome, guys, to everyone, and good evening to everyone. As the topic is architecting the digital landscape kind of thing, secure digital landscape, which is an excellent kind of a topic. Let me step back a little. Although we there's a lot of talk around work from everywhere, work from home, and other things, but all these started from there only. So little step back kind of a thing. A year and a half back, organizations were sitting comfortably on everything and doing their business, growing at their own speed. But now what has happened, there is a compulsion around adoption of a digital. You have to ensure you take care of two facets of your organization. One is an employee who works from home or works from anywhere, and the second fact is the customers. Now everything going digital, you have to ensure you give the best of the experience to your customers, so that everything could happen digitally. For me, learning of this 1.5 year has been around how do I enable my customers to ensure they do things very digitally. But if there has been trend, and a lot of people and a lot of saying has been that due to this digital adoption, the attacks, the number of attacks has increased drastically. It's how do you architect this all these things of enabling your customer, your employees in a secure way. That is the whole idea of this conversation, if I brief in short. So one of the biggest learning that we had is you have to be agile. Now there was a business continuity management in place, which was partial at a ratio. There was a DR at a ratio. There were resources who were not full-fledged access, with not full-fledged access. There were no endpoints given to the employees, kind of thing. So all these learnings came around. Now there were a lot of new initiatives that we built from 1 year and a half, and we put things in place so that over next 6 months we are there and we are ready for anything of this eventuality kind of thing that happens. Right now architecting a digital landscape is you have to work. So the facets that you were to do earlier to a year and a half was something different. You used to sit, used to recommend something on the security front to your business. Whether it's implemented, you had that time kind of thing. But today, with this increasing attacks, digital adoption, you have to work hand in gloves with your business team. You want to ensure that whatever is going into your production or whatever new adoption is happening, it is with the security inbuilt there. Or else, as rightly said, when are you going to be attacked? But then that to take care of that, to ensure there is a detection at time, these things are to be designed that way. And that's the whole learning around it. And the second part, which I want to just give you quickly out of, is the new landscape that is going to be built in next 6 months, because the background of that is going to be what happened in a year and a half, as new technologies that is going to be adopted by people. Zero trust due to your agile parameter across different clouds, different um, infrastructure. Zero trust is one of them. SASE is one of the very important concepts that is going to be adopted. Many organizations have adopted. In fact, if we want to say, we are also one of them who have initiated on their journey. So there are many organizations who have just started to adopt, and it's going to be a big thing. over a period of next 6 months or a year, where they have to adopt out of compulsion to ensure you architect your digital landscape in a very secure manner due to this growing adoption of cloud.
Would you also like to share some more experiences related to what you have seen as the most important goalpost changes in the last few months?
So from the technology perspective, security technology perspective, I'll give you a few examples. So there were organizations who were on a traditional antivirus kind of a thing. Then they adopted an EDR kind of a solution. Over a period of 6 months, it became to XDR kind of a solution. Now the organizations who had adopted an EDR, can they completely change to XDR? That cannot happen. So there are continuous change in the technology. There is a change in the you could say a goalpost kind of thing, but organizations have to adopt to their requirements kind of thing. So there is another thing. If I put in perspective, where SOC, everyone wants to detect today, everyone wants to do the threat hunting kind of a thing, but based on your organization setup, based on your capabilities, how much you want to absorb the risk and how much you want to mitigate that, you decide on the SOC methodology, whether it's an on-premises, whether it's a managed services, or you want to go with an hybrid kind of a thing. All these things has changed over a period of year and a half. All these things have actually changed the complete goalpost. So you say changing goalposts, it's total shift from one angle to other angle, and that has been happening in security environment, in security for the security professionals.
Interesting. Let me come back to you a little later, and we will have some wonderful conversations around to this changing goalpost
Yeah.
in the digital environment and landscape next. Before that, Rishi, I definitely got to read that interesting report from Forrester and NTT about the embracing next generation security for a secure digital landscape. So, and some very interesting revelations about the kind of attacks and the undetected attacks and things. I would probably like you to give a small synopsis before we start on with the conversation related to it. Over to you.
Okay, sure. Thanks and good afternoon, everyone. So thanks for joining this event. It's great to have everybody. It's great to have Sanjay ji and Babu. So I just want to start, and I'll not take too much of time on this, but I want to give some quick background about what we do as NTT, because many customers know us as more to do with the network and more to do with system integration. And the realization is not there in terms of our capabilities around security services. So Entity Limited brings together about USD $11 billion worth of revenue globally. We have around 40,000 employees worldwide. Most interestingly, we've brought together around 31 companies, right? And a lot of these security capabilities have come from those companies that have come together. We have presence in 57 countries. We have R&D investment worth almost $3.5 billion. So a lot of it is actually going into our thought leadership, and that goes into helping clients. And why do customers choose Entity Limited? And specific to security, I'm talking about, or cyber security services. We have around 2,000 plus security experts. In India alone, we have 10 plus SOCs that we operate. The kind of data we analyze is pretty humongous. We are a tier 1 ISP. We have our own IP network, global IP network, and that sees a huge amount of data flow through it every day. So we get access to information through that data in terms of the globally known sources of threats or global events that are happening, right? Specifically in India, we have two shared SOCs that we operate. One is from Mumbai and one is from Bangalore, and these support both Indian customers as well as global customers. Some of the analyst recognitions. So we've been recognized by Frost & Sullivan as the 2020 Asia Pacific Managed Security Services Provider of the Year. White Hat was one company that Entity Limited acquired a couple of years back, and it is one of the when it comes to application security testing, it is one of the Gartner's Magic Quadrant leader participant. And we have accolades from IDC, we have accolades from the MSSP Alert, and basically many such awards that actually attest to the fact in terms of how we offer cybersecurity services to our clients. Okay, now coming to the interesting part, which is basically the Global Threat Intelligence Report. So what happens is every year, NTT releases this Global Threat Intelligence Report. And this is a report that is a first-hand report. It comes from our deep interactions with clients. It comes from all of the information that we see going through our Aksha network. It comes from all of the engagement that we have with our clients for security services and managed services. And a lot of surveys that we do with customers as well. Right? So these are all this is the result of around 15,000 security engagements with clients. It's come out of about 150 cybersecurity consulting engagements that we have done globally. The kind of things that our R&D centers see day in and day out. The global threat intelligence platform that we have set up, and through that we collect a lot of data. So this data that I'm going to talk about is basically relevant from the period 1st January 2020 to 31st December 2020. Now, 9 months of that period was when the first wave of COVID was came and peaked and then subsided. And, the first 3 months from March, April onwards were full of panic. And the attackers took major benefit of that panic, and there was a huge jump. Right, so whatever we see out here is basically a true reflection of how the attackers end up taking a lot of advantage of the fear and panic of not just this pandemic, but any other events in the market. Right. So this analysis is based on log, event, attack, incident, vulnerability data, all of those things. So moving quickly, some of the global key findings that we wanted to share. The industries in line of fire, we've seen that mainly finance, manufacturing, and healthcare dominated above all others, right? Now, of course, that may not come as a surprise because healthcare remained in focus because of COVID, and finance traditionally has remained the top target of attackers. What we also observed is the changing face of malware. So in the last 1 year, miners and Trojans replaced spyware as the most common malware, right? And so if you see, this kind of information is really relevant when it comes to being able to put together a strategy in place, being able to fine tune your tactics in terms of how you respond to threats, right? Cryptocurrency miners thrived in this scenario because cryptocurrency, and we all know what's going on with Bitcoin and Dogecoin and Shibu and Shiba and all of those meme currencies as well. So cryptocurrency miners thrived, and cryptocurrency miners don't necessarily bring your servers down, but they end up costing you a lot because they consume energy, because they consume resources, and they reduce efficiency of your infrastructure. So that's as bad as any other threat. Okay. The COVID-19 emboldened the threat groups. So criminal and nation state threat groups were very active, and they used COVID-19 as a hook to enable attacks. Again, it was a year of privacy and protection in the new normal. So the work from home things enabled a lot of questions around data privacy, enabled a lot of questions around confidentiality, right? So and the same work from home wave also kind of put the focus back on application specific and web application attacks. And so how do we help customers in all of this? So we take a continuous assess, architect, implement, and manage approach. So which basically means that we help you visualize and execute successful security programs that are secure by design. We get into consulting engagements with clients, help you understand the current state of your cybersecurity framework and posture, and help you build a roadmap. Not just that, we help you select and align and design the right controls and technologies to enable that roadmap or to deliver on that roadmap, right? And once that is in place, it's the implementation and support where we do the BAU support. So system integration activities followed by operation support 24/7, day-to-day checks, availability monitorings, performance fine-tuning, the fine-tuning of the configurations, all of those things, right? So it's a continuous cycle that we help our customers with. So this is the security services dashboard, and I'm not going to get into the details of it, but suffice to say that when it comes to delivering on security services, NTT provides solutions across the network, application, end user, and data solutions. And while those are siloed solutions, we also provide solutions that cut across all of these silos and help you get more better visibility and help you find the needle in the haystack. So solutions around security analytics, decoys, audits across all of these 4 towers, threat intelligence. And again, all of this followed by 24/7 SOC support. So we have our skin in the game. We don't just sell a technology to you and then walk out of it. We are there for implementing it. We're there for supporting it on a 24/7 basis. These are the SOC delivery models that we have. So a captive model is where we have people, process, technology, everything on site. A remote model is where we have the people and the process remote, but things like log collectors on site. Then we have a hybrid model where some parts of the component are on site and most of it is from a platform driven approach. And then the last one is a completely cloud-based approach for customers who like more of SaaS offerings, right? So we provide solutions around all of this thing. And finally, I just wanted to touch upon one thing, which is the global threat intelligence platform that Entity has built. And this is one of the things that really differentiates us as a cybersecurity company, because this is our homegrown platform. We take feeds from external partnerships and alliances that you see out here on the left. And at the same time, we build our own threat intelligence from the different engagements that we have, whether it is consulting engagements or operations engagement or monitoring engagements with clients, right? So that actually comes into an all of a Entity Limited threat data lake, and that forms the global threat intelligence platform, which adds a lot of value to our customers. Okay, so that is in a very quickly what I wanted to showcase. Over to you, Babu, again.
Fantastic. I think there were some very good takeaways from your report, and I'll come one by one on that. Well, let's get into some very interesting conversations. One is there was a very good conversation about the golden triangle, people, process, and technology coming together. And Sanjay, you have also been, you will agree with me that the best of the technology and the worst of the people, an Intel inside and an idiot outside will never work. So, what are those interesting things that you think? How are people and processes today changing to take advantage of this intelligent technology coming up? What kind of new mechanisms are being built by CISOs today to ensure that they are updated and they get the best out of this automated technologies, artificial intelligence in security, or whatever intelligence that is coming in security?
Yeah. So people, process, and technology, all three are important today also, and it was earlier also. So you rightly said. If you say from a CISO's perspective, those challenges do stay. Yes, rightly said. There are a lot of improvements that CISOs have started focusing on the people front and also the process front, kind of a thing as an organization, because the awareness across the gamut of organizations and the management is increased, as rightly said by the survey also. So that 50% who are aware of the things and the management is supporting things, that has played a very, very, very huge role, a kind of a thing. One thing which I want to bring up around the report also, 50% are still unaware. And that was really surprising from the survey that showed me. But from the CISO's perspective, as you said, people, process, and technology, there is a lot of emphasis on the awareness perspective. CISOs are trying really hard to bring in these things. There's a lot of emphasis on the processes also, as you rightly said, and the people have started not only putting those in on papers, but also implementing in those in their organization. And that is where the difference is. So what CISOs have started doing, what I have seen around the circle, and when I have discussions with them, at least they have started prioritizing those processes and putting those processes in place. Earlier, it used to be on paper. For compliance, it is there. The process is in there, and the people are also there. But today, they have started implementing. Although this has brought up a change in a lot of perspective to an organization, but still we are not there. We need to be there, and that is where the whole thing comes in. After adopting your digital landscape, you have to ensure you put these things together, your people, process. Although technology emphasis is everywhere, so although there would be investment, but people, process is one of the key aspects.
Interesting. Now, since you said about people, processes, and a lot of intelligence coming into the system, Okay. One thing is also how to build that intelligence into the system and also do the hunting of the threats using the intelligent systems. This is where both the things happen. One is, of course, the intelligence of the system, and second is the intelligence of the human being in hunting the right kind of threats and identifying, hey, this is going to be not a false alarm, but it is actually a threat. So let me ask Rishikesh. Rishikesh, what are the new instances of threat hunting that is happening, and what is new coming in threat hunting these days?
So when it comes to threat hunting, I think threat hunting is something which is more exploratory in nature. And so one needs to think about how do you go ahead finding the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns, in the threats that are there. Because you have the attackers which are lurking in your network, they are there in your network, and the whole objective of threat hunting is to go and find them. Now what we see is a lot of IOCs and IOAs that are already known can be used to do the initial level of threat hunting. So they can be that's more simpler in nature. Then threat hunting can be done using a more exploratory approach, looking at the logs. One has to then form an hypothesis that probably this is the kind of attack that could have happened, and then go and look for the evidences of that happening in the logs. Well, another thing is that if you are prone, or if your organization is prone to attack by a particular type of nation state actor, and then you know the techniques and procedures that nation state actor is going to use against you, then you take that, and basis that you do the threat hunting and try and find out if there is something that is there on the network. Because today, and the reason why we need to do all of this threat hunting is because today there is a lot of malware which is fileless. There is a lot of activity which is fileless. It doesn't necessarily leave a trace in your network, right? And it forms, and there is a lot of ephemeral. There are a lot of ephemeral systems also. Customers are using cloud instances. Customers are using containers. So it becomes difficult to actually keep a trace of all of the logs and all of the information that's happening into those. So that's the reason why you do threat hunting on top of the traditional SOC monitoring that's already in place, to try and find out those known unknowns and unknown unknowns that were otherwise not detected by those solutions in place.
And Sanjay, any interesting strategies that you have seen recently coming up in threat hunting, which you would like to mention about?
Yeah. So the threat hunting generally, it's a journey that is to be decided by an organization. It does not happen overnight, kind of thing. A lot of threat intelligence from service providers like entity and other people help in getting these things. So what has happened is traditionally these automated alerts that come in, and these L1 guys monitor those alerts. So it's a journey, as I said. So we have built in, or a couple of us in a group whom I know as a CISO, they have built in this maturity model around it. So there is an initial kind of a model where you monitor only the automated alerts coming in, and you try to correlate and find out something. Over a period of time, once you are there and you have something meaningful in place, you try to further enhance that, basing building some data model over that, and try to see whether someone is already sitting into your network and doing something which you are not aware. As he said, known and known unknowns, kind of thing. So how do you correlate further? You take third party services, you take that threat intelligence, you take all these data, build in something, and you try to come up with something interesting. Something is happening which is not expected out of, and then you try to take action, you build in procedures, kind of a thing around it. So there is a lot of there is a maturity model that comes with threat hunting, which is to be built over a period of time. But most of the organizations work on preventive measures. This is the detection which has to happen. So one of the talks which I was hearing, it was today, at least in India, I could say 80% people work on prevention. They say, I have an antivirus, I have a firewall, I am preventing, I have one hardening, I have different tools, I'm preventing an hacker to get into it. But they are not working on through the detection part. That is the 20% part, which is very important, and which is where everyone should start working on the threat hunting kind of thing. Everyone should embark on this journey of this threat hunting, because the first day you'll not get the output. I'm sure Rishikesh would agree to it. If there is a threat hunting process to be set, there has to be some maturity, and the people part is very important here. So it's the people mind which thinks and brings out something out of the data which is available in front of him.
Interesting, interesting. In fact, I see another good possibility of having a contest of threat hunting in organization.
Obviously.
So, threat hunting contest within the organization, with the CISOs like you can probably initiate and see how these things can be detected. There are some brilliant brains who can do that.
Yep. So it's also threat hunting is absolutely on your smartness. What do you take out of the data? That is the whole thing. It's a manual process. You cannot automate these things. So it's your mind, how sharp and how bright it is, and how what you can understand from the pattern that has been created. And one of the good ideas is that you can always have a contest among the teams and give them the data and what they inference out of it. Every mind has a different way of thinking.
In fact, there is also one more question from a district central cooperative bank, which are typically the banks which don't have a higher budget in security like that of most of the others. What are the kind of security solutions or uh, uh, availabilities, especially for smaller level of organizations with limited budget, who are mostly operating on an ASP model kind of core banking system? Any thoughts, Rishi?
I think any organization, large or small, typically would need to take a risk-based approach towards implementing it, right? Just because you're a large organization and you have a lot of funds does not mean that you keep pumping those funds behind that, right? Because ultimately, for any organization, funds are at a premium, right? There is a cost to capital, and so if you deploy capital in redundant or unnecessary controls, you are not able to use that capital for more revenue generating opportunities. And so there is a cost to capital. So whether it is a small organization which is having less number of budget, less amount of budget, or a large organization having huge amount of budget, I think what needs to be done is they need to identify what is the risk that my organization has from cyber threats, right? And how much amount of risk am I willing to accept? How much amount of risk am I willing to mitigate? How much amount of risk should I be transferring? Once that is identified, then you can do a risk assessment and identify your actual crown jewels that you need to protect, the most important parts of your organization, of your IT landscape that you need to protect, right? And then you go about putting those controls in place around those solutions. And there too, one need not look at the most new shiny thing in the market. If you are starting from scratch, one can start with a lower level of maturity, something that gives you just enough protection to begin with, and then you, as the confidence grows, you can then increase on that, right? Specifically about low budget, specifically when there is a severe budget constraint, I would definitely recommend organizations to explore SaaS-based offerings, to explore OpEx-based solutions, to explore outsourcing to managed security service providers, because there you retain the flexibility that you don't need to enter into a longer-term contract. You don't end up investing for something that you're stuck with for the next 5 years when the security landscape has changed, but you have to continue to use that. So you work with the managed security service provider and you have shorter term contracts or exit clauses within those contracts, so that it allows you to take a decision after 1 year whether to continue, whether to exit, whether that partner is performing or not performing, and things like that.
Interesting. In fact, there has been one very good question that which has come to me in this question answer, is that we have seen a maturity trajectory from NOC to SOC, and then followed by SOAR, EDR, EDTR, XDR, MDR, Zero Trust, and now SASE. The question before CISO is, if he wants to adopt a technology or framework, before that there is a new technology. Okay, which essentially comes to the question that we talked about, the constantly changing goalposts in front of a CISO. So now, as a CISO, how do CISOs actually look at a possibility of, adapting themselves to constantly changing, or how do they have the vision to at least see that what is the future? How can they future-proof them to at least few months or to few years, so that their technology investments does not become redundant instantly after deployment?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very good question. Actually, that question always keeps on coming to my mind, as I said earlier also. So you adopt a technology and over a period of time, there is a new technology. But rightly said, that's a big challenge for CISOs because new technologies and new things keep on coming. But one thing that CISO needs to remember is the practical environment of your organization. As I said, probably couple of years back when EDR was there, I adopted an EDR. Today I don't find a need to go ahead and implement an XDR. The SASE part, the reason I had to implement a SASE was due to the business environment, the digital adoption. Now, so it's totally on your requirement. What is that you are willing to do? But basics remain there. So as a CISO, what I have done is for my organization, I was 2.5 years as a CISO before I took over this new role of heading the cybersecurity and IT. So when I started, what I did, I built on the basics of everything. I understood my vulnerabilities, my penetration testings. Yeah, I want to see what traffic is going outside, how my servers and devices are hardened, what is the exposure external. So those basics remain there, although these fancy words. And so I'm always kind of not inclined to all these fancy words and fancy technologies, which is rightly asked by Venkatraman. I think Venkatraman has asked this question, which is absolutely perfect to be. And then I found a need where I replaced my traditional antivirus to an this signature less antivirus because of certain issues in my environment. I did not go because of this all buzzword around and new technology kind of thing. I saw there is a requirement actually, and this is a solution with thorough POC, and that suits my environment. Hence, I went ahead. But I'm with him. You should not go ahead with all these fancy kind of a thing, and you should implement what is best suited for your organization, where you can mitigate your risk to the maximum. You understand, you listen to everything, but adopt as per your organization, because every organization has their own needs. There are big organizations who have this money, and probably a CISO would take over. The market is doing this, market is there, and you go ahead and implement. That should not be the approach. And I'm totally in line with the question and the concern of the person who has asked this.
In fact, Venkat has one more question, but before that, I have Ravi Epituri also. He is the Chief Operating Officer of an interesting IT company, and he has shared some interesting perspective about the low adoption of cloud-delivered security solution. So, why are financial services organization, or for that matter, many of the organization reluctant to have cloud delivered security solutions and require it on prem? What is the is that changing with the adoption of cloud and with the kind of what you call as acceptance that cloud is getting?
Obviously. So what I have seen over a period of 2 years, so you rightly said, see, cloud is here since last 10 years that I am hearing, at least in India. But that has improved over a period of 1.5 years due to compulsion, maybe. I don't know, due to compulsion, because all these things have happened, and there is an access to be given to an employee from his house and also to the customers with the so no one is going to go into your data center and deploy a hardware or a server kind of a thing. Virtualization is there, but still maintaining your physical hardware is difficult part of it. So it has improved, but he rightly said, still that part is there. It's not really there as you see in the in the foreign or countries where they are open to. But the fear is around the data, which is there. The second fear which I have seen is if these things are not under your control, will you be able to manage them properly? So two fears that is drawing them back is one is the data. Where does it reside? You don't know because you don't have the control over it. And whether you will be able to manage, bring back that data or that infrastructure, and do you have a control over it? So maybe that is the fear around. So Indians have this mindset, basically, sub apne paas hona chahiye. You should have with yourself everything, and that is one of the reasons that is still holding them back. But people have started to adopt cloud.
Any interesting perspective, and I'm sure that with more and more CTOs and CDOs trying to discuss about or adopting cloud, I think there will be a lot of change into it, and we can probably look into more and more friendliness towards cloud. Now,
Absolutely.
the second thing that also comes regularly in my mind most of the time, digital transformation and data transformation along with cloud storage has been key for the advancement of the BFSI sector. Now, what role of automation? How is the role of automation changing in the cloud-based security today?
Moving to cloud in terms of security and in terms of everything is important now because your users are there on the cloud, right? So if your users are there on the cloud, your workloads are there on the cloud, then obviously your security controls cannot be far behind. You cannot keep your security controls isolated in your data center. They have to be closer to where the users are. They have to be closer to where the workloads are. So from that perspective, we have seen, like Sanjay was mentioning, we have also seen a lot of adoption happening in that, right? Now, one of the other trends that is happening in cloud is there are, we've started leveraging a lot of third-party services, right? So APIs that call one another, microservices that interact with each other. These are becoming more and more ubiquitous in nature, and they are making the whole things more complex, right? In terms of being able to detect a particular attack that's happening within the chain, right? These are the things where automation actually starts coming in and helping us out because with automation, you're now able to identify standard patterns of behavior. So automation can be used in a couple of ways. One of them is to be able to detect some of the most common types of attacks and alerts and flag them off immediately as potential threats without having somebody to spend time and effort analyzing it. So that's one type of automation that helps you detect things faster. And the other type of automation is in being able to, after detection, mitigate those attacks much faster as well, right? So when it comes to mitigation, things like playbooks that can be automated and put up in the put up for different types of attacks. This can also help you reduce the dependency on the people, okay? Because if you have standard playbooks in place, and I'm not saying that everything can be defined in the playbook, but if you start capturing your tacit knowledge, your analyst's tacit knowledge in playbooks and automating those playbooks, that takes a lot of load away from the tier 2 and tier 3 engineers continuously getting involved. And we all know that there is a huge cybersecurity skills gap that is there. So hiring the right kind of talent, retaining that right kind of talent, keeping them motivated becomes more and more challenging. All the while when the number of attacks are continuously increasing and becoming more sophisticated. So that is, these are all the areas where automation actually helps make things much simpler in life.
Ultimately, it is a combination of automation and intelligence of people also. It is not just automation alone, but even people have to make a important impact there to make sure that these things
True. Automation basically is a tool that makes your life more power packed and helps you deliver much better.
Correct. Ultimately, that is what. In fact, there is also a question from one of the attendees on what are the Tejas has asked about what are the parameters used in Global Threat Intelligence Report of 2021 and what has been the kind of increase or decrease in the year of the cyber crimes in India, and have there been any decrease in this year compared to the previous year? Any thoughts you have from
the parameters of the GTI report are mainly things like logs, endpoint telemetry data, the non-machine based interactions, the human interactions that we have had with clients in consulting engagements, network flow data, all of those things go as parameters and go as inputs into the global threat intelligence report. And in terms of increase in the type of cyber attacks, I don't have the data with me, and we are still in the 5th month of 2021. But I'm very sure that the kind of attacks is only going up and it's not going down, because that's the trend that we've seen. The combination of attacks might change, the mix of attacks might change, but overall the cyber attacks are definitely increasing. It's becoming more and more lucrative for the malicious actors to earn from you.
Interesting. So these are the average impact you said is around over 100K in India, which is definitely a serious concerns to look at. And especially in a situation like uh, adoption of cloud and things like that. And in a situation where this constantly changing goalpost, managed services is an interesting solution for anyone to look at, because ultimately the managed service and solution provider is constantly updated about what is the latest happening in the sector. So from a user's perspective or from a user organization perspective, what are the key considerations one should look into when he is looking at aligning with a managed solution service provider?
One can look at a few things, like the capability that the service provider brings to the table, the kind of work they have done, the kind of clients they already have, the kind of tools they're using, how much skin they have in the game. Are they somebody who's going to do just the consulting and walk away from it? Are they somebody who's going to be there as a turnkey project? Do they have that capability to do turnkey projects? What kind of certified resources do they have in the team? What kind of commercial models they are able to give you, because it's important that the commercial models align also to your business. And I think one of the most important things is actually a non-technical aspect, and that's got to do with the culture of the service provider organization. Does the culture of the service provider organization match with your organization, right? If you are a nimble and fast organization, you need to find a service provider that will match your speed of day-to-day changes and walk fast with you, right? But if you are more of an enterprise and prone to work with very fixed processes, and processes large part of your this thing, then you need to make sure that the service provider is aligned accordingly. So making sure that the culture of that service provider is aligned, apart from all of the other aspects like tools and other things that I mentioned about, is also very important.
Thanks. And my final question to you, Sanjay, as an advisor to the or as a CISO, what is your advice or what is your suggestion to fellow CISOs and information security professionals when it comes to architecting the secure digital landscape next? What would you advise your comrades in the industry?
So you work very closely with the business. That is very important kind of thing. There are a lot of things that is to be designed in any organization to ensure whatever is going, means there is a digital adoption that is happening from a business side, and you ensure you imbibe the security from the architecture level itself, from the initiation level itself. So for an example, if you say there is a requirement of a video KYC for this changing environment, the KYC of customers cannot happen by going to the branches and everything. There is a solution that is to be developed by the business teams to ensure there is a regulatory requirement that has been met. Now, how do you ensure the controls of the security is been developed along with that KYC solution kind of a thing? So you have to ensure work very closely. You also create minimum hindrance so that business is ready to come to you as an enabler rather than you blocking their solution going to the market, and you put your controls. So you have to design things. You have to also predict things, what is going to happen. So you have to think from a mindset of a business and the CIO or the CTO, where you are prepared to architect the solution which is required for a digital landscape kind of a thing. And that is what most of the CISOs have been doing. At least I am been doing to ensure I am there. Ultimately, something happens if from an organization perspective, it is CISO is responsible. So he has to change his mindset and change his head around it.
Interesting. That's a very good analogy to end with and an advice to end with. In fact, we have been getting a lot of interesting questions from the teams per se. We will try to answer it offline wherever we can, because we are now already away from the time. And the most important thing that we have all learned from the digital world today is that the digital things cannot keep extending beyond a particular point, because otherwise either the attendees will run away or the people will be getting bored. So let us look at relishing some wonderful answers and wonderful insights out of this quick conversation of 1 hour that we have had. And we will look forward to add more fodder to the future conversations we will have from here. Thank you very much, Rishi, and thank you very much, Sanjay, for a wonderful conversation. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.